I didn't argue when my son-in-law told me the basement wasn't really livable, and maybe it was time I found my own situation. I just nodded, finished my tea, and started looking at apartment listings on my phone before he'd even left the kitchen. My name doesn't matter here, but I'll tell you the rest. I'm 58, a retired electrician out of Hamilton, Ontario. 31 years with the union, IBE Local 105, before my knees gave out and the doctor told me climbing scaffolding wasn't in my future anymore. My wife Carol died of ovarian cancer 2 years before any of this happened. We'd been married 33 years. After the funeral, after the house on Concession Street sold faster than I expected, I had a decent chunk of money in the bank and absolutely nowhere I needed to be every morning. That's a strange kind of freedom. It feels a lot like falling. My daughter called me in the spring. She and her husband had just bought a place out in Stoney Creek, a big 2-story with a finished basement and a 3-car garage. The kind of house that makes you wonder how 2 people in their 30s afford it until you find out. Later, it's mostly the bank's house, not theirs. She said, "Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around in that little apartment by yourself. We've got the basement. It's basically its own suite. Come stay with us." Her voice had that warmth I remembered from when she was a kid, climbing into bed next to me during thunderstorms. I wanted to believe it was that same kind of love talking. So I sold most of my furniture, kept the things that mattered, my tools, Carol's wedding ring in its box, a few photo albums, and I moved into that basement in May. The basement itself wasn't bad, to be fair. A pull-out couch, a little bar fridge, a window that looked out at ground level toward the backyard. My son-in-law worked in commercial real estate, always on his phone, always talking about deal flow and cap rates, with people who weren't in the room. He was polite to me in that handshake and smile way some men are polite, the kind where you can tell the warmth has an expiration date stamped somewhere you can't see. It started small. I'd hear the garage door go up at 6 in the morning. My son-in-law leaving for some open house or client's breakfast, and by the time I came upstairs there'd be a note on the counter. "Can you grab the kids from school today? Can you start dinner? We'll be back around 7. My daughter taught grade 4 at a school across town, and between her hours and his showings, somebody had to be there when their 2 kids got off the bus. I didn't mind, not at first. I liked the noise of grandkids in the house. I liked having a reason to be useful again, after 31 years of being needed somewhere every single morning, and then suddenly being needed nowhere at all. But the notes kept getting longer. The asks kept getting bigger. By July, I was doing the grocery shopping every Tuesday, with a list my daughter texted me, picking up both kids from 2 different schools, making dinner 5 nights a week, doing the family's laundry, because, as my son-in-law put it once, "You're down here anyway, and the machines are right next to your room." I started keeping a little log in my head without meaning to. Tuesday, groceries, school pickup, dinner, dishes. Wednesday, same, I never said anything. I told myself this was just what family did for each other, that Carol would have wanted me close to the grandkids, that being useful was a kind of belonging. The thing that should have told me something was the dinner parties. My daughter and son-in-law liked to entertain his colleagues mostly, couples from the brokerage, people with names like Whitfield and Pemberton, who drove German cars and talked about renovations the way other people talk about their kids. Every time they hosted, I was the one in the kitchen, marinating the salmon, prepping the appetizers, making sure the wine was breathing at the right time. And every time, around 6:30, my son-in-law would knock on the basement door, not to invite me up, but to ask if everything was on schedule. I'd serve the food, clear the plates, and then quietly take my dinner down to the basement and eat alone, while I listened to laughter filtering through the floorboards above me. I told myself it was fine. I told myself a lot of things were fine that year. In September, his mother came to visit from Victoria, out on the West Coast, and stayed 2 weeks. She was perfectly pleasant to my face, the kind of pleasant that comes from a woman who's spent her whole life getting what she wants by being agreeable in public. She complimented the house, complimented her grandchildren, complimented the roast I'd made on a Sunday. I'd specifically planned around having nothing else to do. And at some point during that visit, my son-in-law mentioned, almost offhand, that his mother would probably want the basement when she came to stay longer in the winter, since she was getting older, and the stairs in their own house in Victoria weren't kind to her hips anymore. He said it like it was a fact already settled, not a question, not even really news, just something I should start factoring into my plans. I didn't say anything that day either. October came in cold, the way it does in southern Ontario, that first real frost that tells you summer's not coming back this year. My daughter had a parent-teacher conference week, longer hours, more exhausted by the time she got home, and the asks from her end got sharper too. Can you handle the kids' homework tonight? I'm wiped. Can you take Tyler to hockey practice? I have report cards. I want to be clear, none of this was said unkindly. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. Nobody in that house was cruel to me. They were just busy and I was convenient. And somewhere along the way, those two facts had quietly become the same thing in their minds. The night it broke open was a Thursday, the third week of October. My son-in-law had a dinner that night for some real estate awards thing, the kind where everyone dresses up and there's a step and repeat banner with a logo on it. And he and my daughter were both going, leaving the two kids with me, which was normal by then, completely normal, expected without being asked. Around 5:30, as they were getting ready upstairs, I heard them through the floor vent in my room, the one that carried sound from the kitchen straight down if you were quiet. My daughter's voice, first. Mom would never have made him do this much. His voice, lower, a little impatient. He's not doing anything else with his time. What's the alternative? He sits down there alone all day feeling sorry for himself. At least this way he's useful. A pause. Then her again, quieter. I just feel guilty sometimes. Don't, he likes it. He'd never say if he didn't. I sat on the edge of that pull-out couch for a long time after I heard that. Useful. He'd never say if he didn't. I thought about 31 years of climbing onto scaffolding in February with my hands going numb inside my gloves because a foreman needed the wiring done before a city inspection, and how I never once heard the word useful attached to me like that, like it was the whole of what I was for. I thought about Carol, how she used to say my name like it meant something on its own, not like it was a function. I thought about how nobody in that house upstairs had asked me a single question about how I was doing, really doing, in maybe 4 months. They left for the dinner around 6:30. I made the kids supper, helped with homework, got them into bed by 8:30 like always. And then I sat at the little table in my basement room, and I did something I hadn't let myself do in months. I actually thought about what I wanted. I didn't make a scene. I want to say that clearly, because I know how these stories sometimes go. Somebody screaming on the stairs, doors slamming. That wasn't me, and it wasn't this. The next morning, I waited until my daughter had left for school, and my son-in-law was in his home office on a call, and I packed. It didn't take long. I had never really unpacked, not all the way, not since May. I left a note on the kitchen counter, not angry, just true. It said I loved them, that I loved the grandkids more than I had words for, and that I needed to go live somewhere I was a guest, not a feature of the house. I left my key on top of the note, and I called a cab to take me to a Holiday Inn Express off the highway, because I hadn't figured out yet where I was actually going to live. Only that it wasn't going to be that basement. My daughter called 4 times before noon. I let it ring. She called my cell. Then the hotel switchboard somehow found me by evening, and I finally picked up because I didn't want her genuinely panicking that something had happened to me. Dad, where are you? The kids are asking, this doesn't make sense. Why would you just leave like that? I told her what I'd heard through the vent. I didn't raise my voice doing it. I just repeated it back to her, word for word. The way you'd read someone a weather report. There was a long silence on the other end, long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Dad, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean it like that. I believe you didn't mean to say it cruelly, I told her. I think that's almost worse. It means you weren't performing for anyone. That's just what you actually think when you're not thinking about it. She cried. I sat on the end of a hotel bed with bad floral carpet, and let her cry without trying to fix it for once in my life. Over the next 3 weeks, while I sorted myself out, I rented a 1-bedroom in a low-rise building in Burlington, 20 minutes from my old neighborhood, close enough to a bus route that I didn't need to deal with parking, close to a library and a community center with a wood shop in the basement, which felt like a strange kind of joke given everything. I used some of the money from Carol's in my house, not all of it, just enough to set up a place that was unambiguously mine. A real bed. A kitchen table for one that I bought new instead of secondhand, because for once I wanted something nobody else had touched first. I bought a set of good knives, a cast iron pan. Things I'd never bothered with when I was cooking for 6 people every night, and just trying to get food on the table fast. My daughter texted more than she called at first. Short things. I'm sorry. Can we talk? The kids miss you, I answered. but slowly on my own time, which was new for me too. 3 weeks after I left, she asked if she could come see the new place, alone, no husband, no kids. I said yes. She sat at that new little table I'd bought and looked around the apartment like she was trying to read something in it. It's small, she said, not unkindly, more like she was working something out loud. It's mine, I said. That's the part that matters. She started crying again, the real kind this time, not the kind from the phone call. She told me she'd been so deep in her own exhaustion, the job, the kids, the marriage, that she'd stopped seeing me as a person who had his own losses to carry and started seeing me as a resource to manage. Her word, resource. I told her I appreciated her saying it, and I meant that, but I also told her that appreciating it didn't undo 4 months, and that I needed time before I was back in that house, on any kind of regular basis, that the next time I walked through their door, it had to be as a guest who got asked, not assumed. Her husband called me twice over the following month. The first time he tried the easy charm, telling me the kids needed their grandfather, that I was overreacting to one private conversation he hadn't even meant for me to hear. I told him that not meaning for me to hear, it was exactly the problem, not the defense he thought it was. The second call, a few weeks later, was different, quieter. He admitted he'd never really thought about what those months had cost me, that he'd categorized me in his head the way he categorized properties, an asset that either performed or didn't. He said it like it embarrassed him to hear himself say it out loud, and for the first time since I'd met him, I believed he meant something. I started going to that community center wood shop on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. There's a retired machinist there named Walt who runs it, sharp as a tack, terrible jokes, and slowly I've been building a set of bookshelves for the apartment. Nothing fancy, just clean lines and good joints, the kind of work where your hands know what they're doing even when your head is somewhere else. I see my grandkids most Sundays now, at a park or a pizza place, somewhere neutral, somewhere I chose. My daughter and I are rebuilding something, slower than either of us would like, but real this time, built on actual conversations instead of assumptions about what I'd put up with. I think about that basement sometimes, not with anger anymore, more with a kind of clear-eyed sadness for the man who sat down there for 4 months, telling himself that being needed and being loved were the same thing, because admitting they weren't would have meant admitting how alone he actually was. I was wrong about that. They're not the same thing. Being needed can run out the second you stop being convenient. Being loved doesn't ask you to prove it every single day. I'm 58 years old, and it turns out that's not too old to learn that lesson, or too old to walk out a door before someone has to push you through it.